My daughter-in-law leaned across the linen tablecloth, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper as she told the table they had only invited me out of pity. She laughed, touching my arm like I was a charity case, completely oblivious that the luxury apartment we sat in, the brand new car downstairs, and the credit card she was about to use all legally belonged to me. I simply took a sip of water and smiled. My name is Eleanor Whitford. At 61 years old, wearing a dress I had mended myself 3 times, I felt less like a guest and more like a stain on the pristine tablecloth of the Skylark. This was one of the most expensive rooftop restaurants in downtown Charlotte, the kind of place where the air conditioning was kept at a temperature designed to freeze out anyone who could not afford a cashmere wrap. The waiter glided past me as if I were invisible, his eyes drawn instantly to the massive diamond ring glittering on my daughter-in-law's finger. Vanessa, or as her 50,000 followers on social media knew her, the face of Valoria by V. Mom, you sit here. It is better for the flow, Vanessa said, guiding me to a chair that was partially obscured by a large decorative fern. It was the worst seat at the table, naturally. Her smile was a practiced grimace, tight and devoid of warmth. She did not wait for me to thank her. She was already busy fluffing her hair and checking her phone screen to see if the engagement on her latest post had climbed past 1,000 likes yet. I sat down, silently, smoothing the faded fabric of my skirt. Around us, the chatter of Charlotte's elite hummed like a hive of bees. Vanessa raised her champagne flute, the crystal catching the ambient lighting. "It has been such a crazy year," she announced to the table, her voice pitched perfectly to carry over the music. Jason and I finally closed on the Lakeside Grove villa, and with the new luxury SUV, honestly, hard work really pays off. We built Valoria from the ground up, just the 2 of us. Self-made, baby. Jason, my son, sat beside her. He adjusted his silk tie, nodding sagely. "Self-reliance is the only way to survive in this economy," he added, taking a sip of his drink. I stared at him. He said nothing about the down payment. He said nothing about the guarantor's signature on the mortgage. He said nothing about the fact that his definition of self-reliance was funded entirely by the woman sitting behind the potted fern. A woman across the table, one of Vanessa's wealthy friends, tilted her head at me, her gaze lingering on my worn shoes. "Does your mother live with you too?" "Vanessa, it must be hard to manage rent alone at that age." Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "Oh, God, no. We felt bad leaving her alone tonight. We have to have that wholesome family vibe for the photos. Right. Consider it our good deed for the week." The table chuckled politely. I felt a hot flush of shame rise up my neck, but I swallowed it down. When the bill arrived, the total was staggering, out of instinct, and perhaps a desperate need to prove I had some worth. I reached for my purse. "I can help with the tip," I offered quietly. Vanessa's hand shot out across the table, clamping down on my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin, sharp and manicured. She leaned in close, her perfume cloying and sweet, and lowered her voice just enough to pretend it was a secret, yet loud enough for half the table to hear clearly. "Put that away," she hissed, before smiling brightly for the onlookers. "We only invited you out of pity, so don't stay too long." "Okay." The air at the table seemed to vanish. The guests shifted in their seats, looking down at their half-eaten desserts. A few exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable with the naked cruelty of the statement. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to be the man his father had raised. Jason frowned, but not at her malice. He frowned at the awkward pause in the conversation. He cleared his throat and turned his shoulder to me. Anyway, about that merger deal worth 20 million. He continued, seamlessly erasing me from the narrative of his life. My fingers found the edge of the linen napkin in my lap. I squeezed it. I squeezed it until my knuckles turned the color of old bone and my joints ached. But my face remained a mask of absolute, terrifying calm. I lifted my water glass, looked straight into Vanessa's carefully made-up eyes, and smiled. It was not a kind smile. A waiter hovering nearby to refill the water glasses actually took a step back, his instinct detecting the sudden, glacial drop in temperature coming from the poor old woman in the corner. "You think I am here because of your charity?" "Vanessa." The voice in my head was clear, sharp, and cold. "That villa you brag about? The bank loan is in my name. That SUV, my credit line, your failing fashion brand. It is kept alive by my cash injections, filtered through shell companies you are too stupid to investigate." But I kept my silence. "Group photo," Vanessa chirped, standing up abruptly. She maneuvered the group, pushing me physically until I was on the very edge of the frame, half cut off. I took a small step back, voluntarily moving out of the shot completely. I looked at them, my son, preening in a suit I paid for, and his wife, shining in jewelry bought with my dividends. This was it. This was the last meal they would ever enjoy at my expense. Tonight, they treated me like a ghost. Tomorrow, I would start haunting them for real. The drive back to my rented apartment was silent, but my mind was loud with memories that drowned out the hum of the engine. To understand why I sat there and took their insults, you have to understand where I came from. I was not born into silk sheets. I was forged in the freezing winters of a small town in Ohio, smelling of bleach and cafeteria meatloaf. In my 20s, I worked double shifts as a waitress and a night aide at a nursing home. That was where the fear took root. I watched elderly people sit by windows for hours, waiting for children who never came, their dignity stripped away along with their assets. I saw the look in their eyes when they realized they were just expensive burdens to their families. I swore then that I would never be that vulnerable. Then I met Frank. He was an HVAC engineer with calloused hands and a laugh that could warm up a blizzard. We started in a drafty mobile home, scraping pennies together to pay the mortgage and raise Jason. We did not have much, but we had a code. "Eleanor, listen to me," Frank would say, tapping the kitchen table with his grease-stained finger. "We do not borrow for consumption. We do not borrow for things that rust or rot. We only borrow to build things that make money. Otherwise, we go without. We went without a lot of things, but we had vision. When the nursing home I worked for was shut down due to a negligence lawsuit, I saw an opening. I knew how to treat people with dignity, and I knew the numbers. I sat Frank down and showed him a handwritten business plan on the back of a utility bill. "It is a risk. L," he told me, his eyes full of worry. "But if you believe in it, I am in." We took every cent of our savings and bought a derelict building on the outskirts of Cleveland. We named it Harbor Lane Senior Living. It was not glamorous. For the first 3 years, I was the manager, the accountant, and the janitor. I changed adult diapers at 2 in the morning and negotiated supplier contracts at 8 in the morning. Frank handled every repair, fixing boilers in the dead of winter to save us the cost of a contractor. We built that empire on sleepless nights and the smell of antiseptic. When the financial crisis hit, our competitors slashed budgets. They cut food quality and staff. I refused. We are not feeding them sawdust. Frank. I shouted at him one night when the bank threatened to pull our line of credit. We keep the quality. We cut our own pay. Reputation is all we have. I was right. While others folded, we grew. An investment fund noticed our retention rates and injected capital. We expanded. But tragedy does not care about business success. Frank died in a car accident on his way home from fixing an AC unit at our third facility. I lost my partner, my love, and my anchor. The day after the funeral, our lawyer sat me down. Eleanor, with Frank gone, you are the sole beneficiary. You own 92% of Harbour Lane Communities LLC. I looked at the papers. I was a millionaire on paper, but my heart was hollow. Jason was just starting college. I looked at my son, so young and unaware of the sheer scale of what we had built. I saw how money ruined the children of the wealthy residents in my facilities. I saw them waiting for their parents to die like vultures circling a carcass. I wanted Jason to be like Frank. I wanted him to build, not just consume. So I made a choice. I hid it all. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. Jason. I told him when he left for law school, I can help a little. But money is tight. I hired my old friend Marisol Reyes to be the public face and CEO of the company. I retreated to the shadows, taking the title of internal advisor. Harbour Lane grew into a network of 36 massive communities across the Midwest, valued in the tens of millions. And nobody knew that the woman in the cardigan signing the approvals was the owner. When Jason moved to Charlotte and met Vanessa, I saw the danger immediately. She was a girl who looked at price tags before she looked at faces. She was obsessed with status. I paid off Jason's law school loans secretly, funneling the money so he thought he had won a hardship scholarship. I wanted to protect him, but I also wanted to test him. Tonight, looking at that diamond ring and hearing her laugh about pity, I realized my test had failed. My silence had not taught him independence. It had only taught him how to be ungrateful. I unlocked the deadbolt of the modest bungalow I rented in a working-class neighborhood of Charlotte. The air inside smelled of old carpet and the lavender fabric softener I used to wash my own curtains. To the world. This was where Eleanor Whitford belonged, a place of faded wallpaper and chipped laminate countertops. But tonight, the silence of the house felt different. It was no longer a refuge. It was a war room. I walked straight to the kitchen, bypassing the kettle I usually put on for tea. I reached up to the wall above the breakfast nook and pushed aside a slightly crooked framed photograph of Frank and me from 1985. Behind it sat a small, fireproof wall safe. I spun the dial left, right, left, and the heavy steel door clicked open. I pulled out 3 thick manila folders and spread them across the cheap kitchen table. The first folder contained the heart of my empire, the Articles of Incorporation for Harbour Lane Communities, LLC. My finger traced the line that mattered most. Shareholder Eleanor M. Whitford, 92%. I flipped to the most recent profit and loss statement. The net profit line was a number with 7 figures, a steady, unyielding stream of income that flowed directly from the 36 facilities I oversaw. I opened the second folder. This was the one that made my chest tighten with a mix of anger and regret. It was labelled Wharfstone Holdings, to Jason and Vanessa. Wharfstone was just some faceless real estate conglomerate that rented them their dream home. To me, it was a shell company I established solely to put a roof over their heads without bruising their fragile egos. I pulled out the deed to the property in Lakeside Grove, paid in full. Then, the lease agreement. The tenant listed was Jason Whitford. The monthly rent was set at a nominal fee of $100, a sum I never even bothered to collect. Next to it was the vehicle lease agreement for the luxury SUV Vanessa drove tonight. Lessee Harbour Lane Corporate Fleet. Assigned driver Vanessa Whitford. They thought they were successful homeowners. In reality, they were subsidized tenants living in company housing. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet. From a hidden slot, I extracted my personal credit card. It was made of black anodized titanium, cold and heavy in my hand. It was a corporate account with no spending limit. I logged into the American Express portal on my laptop and pulled up the activity for the supplementary card issued to Vanessa. The screen filled with rows of transactions. $4,000 at a luxury handbag boutique, $2,000 for a spa retreat, $6,000 to a photography studio for a brand lookbook. I clicked over to the corporate banking portal. There it was, the monthly wire transfer to Valoria by V. On the books. It was listed as a marketing collaboration to promote intergenerational fashion. In reality, it was an allowance. I was not just her mother-in-law. I was her venture capitalist, her safety net, and her only customer. I stopped scrolling and looked up at the refrigerator. There was a magnet holding up a photo of Jason when he was 7 years old. His hair was a mess, and he was missing a front tooth. I remembered that day. He had hugged my leg and told me that when he grew up, he would buy me a castle so I would never have to work again. Now, that same boy told his friends he let me sleep in his guest room out of pity. I opened my email archives. I searched for Vanessa's name. Dozens of messages popped up. Mum, could we get a tiny advance on the marketing budget? We have a huge PR opportunity. Love you. Mum followed by 3 heart emojis. Mum, the car needs servicing. Can corporate cover it? You're the best. I read them again, hearing her voice from tonight overlaying the text. We only invited you out of pity, so don't stay too long. The contrast turned my blood to ice. They did not love me. They loved the friction-free life I provided. They loved the magic trick of bills disappearing and money appearing, never once questioning who the magician was. I picked up my phone. It was nearly midnight, but I did not care. I dialed Marisol. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. Eleanor, is everything okay, Marisol? Sorry to wake you, I said, my voice steady and devoid of the tremor that had shaken me at dinner. Tomorrow morning at 9, I am coming into headquarters. I need a closed-door meeting. No Jason, no Vanessa, just the executive board and Richard from legal. Okay. Marisol hesitated, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. What is the agenda restructuring? I said. Total restructuring. I hung up and opened a file on my laptop that I had created 5 years ago. I had named it Contingency Plan C. Inside was a spreadsheet detailing the legal steps required to sever financial ties with family members who became liabilities, eviction notices, vehicle repossession orders, credit line termination protocols. I had written it as a worst-case scenario, a safety valve I prayed I would never have to turn. Tonight, I was not just turning the valve. I was breaking it off. I stood up and walked to the cabinet, pouring myself 2 fingers of expensive whiskey, the one luxury I allowed myself within these walls. I stood by the small window, looking out at the dark, quiet street. I raised the glass slightly, toasting the empty air. "Frank," I whispered to the reflection in the glass, You told me never to let silence become laziness. You told me to teach him values. I was slow. Frank. God. I was so slow. But it is not too late." The next morning, the atmosphere inside the main conference room of Harbour Lane headquarters was sterile and sharp. I walked in, not as the grandmother in the faded dress from the night before, but as the majority shareholder who controlled the fate of everyone in the building. I took the seat at the head of the mahogany table. Marisol sat to my right, and Richard Cole, our general counsel, sat to my left. "Let's begin," I said, placing my hands flat on the cold table surface. Marisol dimmed the lights and brought up the financial breakdown on the projector screen. It was an autopsy of my own generosity. Over the last 3 years, Marisol began, using her laser pointer to circle a cluster of red bars on the graph. We have funneled approximately $350,000 into Valoria by V. These were categorized as marketing expenses under the guise of intergenerational branding. However, the return on investment is non-existent. Actually, it is negative if we count the brand damage from her association with us. I looked at the numbers. They were just digits on a screen, but they represented hours of my life spent scrubbing floors and balancing ledgers. Richard cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. From a legal standpoint, Eleanor, these transfers were authorized gifts disguised as business transactions. If you want to stop them, we simply stop approving the invoices. We cite a change in marketing strategy. It is clean. "It is not just the business funding," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I want a complete severance of assets. Here is the plan." I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "Step 1, I said. Draft a formal email to Vanessa. Inform her that Harbour Lane is restructuring its partnership program and her contract is terminated effective immediately. Step 2. The lease on the Lakeside Grove property expires in 45 days. Do not renew it. Issue a notice to vacate." Marisol flinched slightly. "Eleanor, that is their home. It is a company asset occupied by tenants who are in arrears on their gratitude," I corrected her. Step 3. The SUV. Initiate the repossession clause. The lease agreement clearly states the vehicle is for the use of authorized brand ambassadors. Once we terminate her contract, she is unauthorized. Marisol looked at Richard, worry creasing her forehead. Jason is a corporate lawyer. Eleanor. He knows how to litigate. If he thinks we are targeting them unfairly, he could drag this out. He could make it ugly. Richard shook his head slowly. He won't. I structured the Wharfstone Holdings agreements myself. Jason is listed strictly as a tenant. He has no equity. He has no claim. He is living in a house he does not own, driving a car he does not lease, spending money he did not earn. Legally, he is a ghost. I nodded, satisfied. But then I leaned forward, adding the twist that made them both pause. "There is one more thing," I said softly. "I want you to establish a separate fund. Call it the Harbour Lane Ethical Fund. Put $50,000 in it to start. Make it anonymous." "For what purpose?" Richard asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. "If Vanessa drags Jason into legal trouble, if she leaves him with debts he cannot pay, or lawsuits he cannot fight, I want that fund available to pay for his defense counsel, but my name must never appear on it." The room went silent. Marisol looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sadness. "I don't understand. You are evicting him, but you are setting up a safety net. Revenge is for Vanessa," I said, looking at the projection of the red financial loss. "She is a parasite. But my son, I am not trying to destroy him. I am trying to force him to see. He needs to be stripped of the illusion so he can see the reality. If he falls, I want him to hit the ground hard enough to wake up, but not hard enough to shatter." I turned to Richard. "Also, review every contract Vanessa has signed with third parties. If she has represented herself as an owner or a partner of Harbour Lane to secure deals, send cease and desist letters. That is fraud." Richard nodded, a small, grim smile playing on his lips. "That is the kill shot for her reputation." "Eleanor." "Do it," I commanded. I spent the next hour signing papers. My signature on the notice of non-renewal was firm. My signature on the credit card cancellation was heavy. With every stroke of the pen, I was cutting the oxygen line to the artificial world they lived in. It felt surgical. It felt necessary. When the meeting ended, Marisol walked me to the elevator. The office hummed with the sound of people working real work. Honest work. "Eleanor?" she asked quietly, placing a hand on the elevator door to stop it from closing. "Are you going to tell him? Are you going to warn him before the letters arrive?" I thought about his face at the dinner. I thought about the silence he offered when his wife humiliated me. "No," I said. "The life he is living has never been real. It is time he learned what it feels like to live in the truth." I let the doors close, sealing my decision. Monday morning began with a digital crash that rippled through the internet before it even reached my living room. I sat in my kitchen, sipping tea, watching Vanessa's Instagram live stream on my tablet. She was in her walk-in closet, surrounded by orange boxes, hosting what she called a luxury haul. Okay. Loves. So I just unboxed the Birkin, but I promised you I would grab the matching silk scarf live right now. Vanessa chirped, tapping her manicured nails on her laptop screen. "It is only $2,000, which is a steal." Watching me check out, and boom, she hit enter. The smile froze. A red banner flashed across her screen, reflected in her ring light. Transaction declined. Oh, weird. She laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Bank glitch. Let me try again. She clicked again. Declined. The comments section, which scrolled rapidly on the side, turned from adoration to mockery instantly. Card bounced. Is she broke? Awkward. Vanessa ended the stream abruptly, blaming the Wi-Fi, but the damage was real. Within minutes. Her phone must have pinged with the notification from the bank supplementary card cancelled by primary account holder. Almost simultaneously, the email from Harbour Lane arrived. I imagined her reading it, the polite, corporate termination of her partnership. Across town, the dominoes continued to fall. Jason called me at 10 in the morning, but I let it go to voicemail. He had just received the registered letter at the villa. It was a formal notice to vacate. "Mum," his voicemail was frantic. "Mum, pick up. There is a mistake. Some property management company called Wharfstone says our lease is up and they are not renewing. They are giving us 45 days. Mum, you handle the rent. What is going on?" I did not call back. I simply archived the message, By noon, Jason's day got worse. He walked out of his high-rise law firm to drive to a client lunch, only to find a bright yellow boot clamped onto the wheel of the black SUV. A tow truck was already backing up. "Hey!" Jason shouted, running across the pavement, his tie flapping in the wind. "That is my car. What are you doing?" The repo man, a burly guy who had seen it all, didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Not according to this. Buddy. This vehicle belongs to the fleet of Harbour Lane Communities. The authorization for the driver has been revoked. Unless you are Vanessa Whitford and you have a valid employment contract, I am her husband." Jason yelled, his face turning red as his colleagues walked past, whispering. "Then you can give her a ride." The man grunted. "Step back." Jason was left standing on the curb, stripped of the metal armor he thought made him important. Back at the villa, the atmosphere had turned toxic. Vanessa was not packing. She was destroying. According to the text updates I received from the security system I still monitored, glass had been broken in the kitchen. She sent me a barrage of texts. "You selfish old witch. You are doing this because you are jealous, aren't you? You want to drag us down to your level because you can't stand that I am young and successful. Jason is weak for letting you control us. You are going to die alone in that dump you rent." I read every word. I did not feel hurt. I felt a clinical detachment, like a doctor observing a patient thrashing during a fever. Desperate. Jason went to the bank that managed the Wharfstone account. He demanded to speak to a loan officer, trying to negotiate an extension on the lease using his own credit. "Mr. Whitford," the bank manager explained, turning the monitor so Jason could see. "The rate you have been paying was a subsidized internal rate of $100 a month. The market value for a property in Lakeside Grove is $8,000 a month, plus a security deposit of $20,000. Can you authorize that transaction right now?" Jason went pale. He made $150,000 a year as an associate, which sounded like a lot, until you factored in the lifestyle he thought he could afford. He could not pay market rate. He was drowning. The final blow of the day came from his own firm. A senior partner called him into a glass-walled office. "Jason, we have a problem," the partner said, tossing a printout onto the desk. It was a leaked copy of the cease and desist letter Harbour Lane had sent to one of Vanessa's fashion partners. "Your wife is being flagged for corporate fraud and misrepresentation. Our client, the Harrison Group, just pulled their retainer. They do not want to be associated with an influencer scandal. We are taking you off the lead counsel team until this clears up." That night, inside the villa that was no longer theirs, the silence broke. "We can spin this," Vanessa screamed, pacing the living room. "We get a reality show. The fall of the Whitfords. It will be huge. We play the victims of a crazy, vindictive mother-in-law." "Stop it," Jason roared, his voice cracking. "I am losing my job. Vanessa, I lost my car. We are losing the house. I am tired. God, I am so tired of living just to feed your Instagram feed." "You are useless," she shrieked back. "If you were a real man, you would have secured the assets." Jason slumped onto the designer sofa, burying his face in his hands. His phone buzzed. It was an email from a small, aggressive law firm specializing in elder law. He opened it, expecting another bill. Instead, it was a courtesy copy of a class action lawsuit filed against Harbour Lane. Plaintiff families of the residents of Green Willow facility. Defendant Harbour Lane Communities LLC. Co-defendant for misrepresentation Vanessa Whitford. Jason stared at the name. The document alleged that Vanessa had signed promotional materials claiming the facility had amenities it did not have, using her status as a brand ambassador to mislead families. She had not just spent the money, she had signed the liability waivers without reading them. "Oh my God," Jason whispered to the empty room. He looked at his wife, who was busy typing a furious caption on her phone. "You didn't just spend the money, you signed your name." Perspective shift. Jason Whitford. We dragged the last of our suitcases into the short-term rental apartment on the edge of the city. The hallway smelled of stale frying oil and damp carpet, a scent that seemed to stick to the back of my throat. It was a one-bedroom unit with peeling paint and furniture that looked like it had been salvaged from a roadside dump. "This is humiliating," Vanessa shrieked, kicking a suitcase across the narrow living room. She pulled out her phone, angling it to catch the only decent light near the window. "Hey guys. Sorry for the silence. Just dealing with a little relocation situation while we renovate the villa. You know how contractors are." She ended the video and glared at me. 300 views. Just 300. Nobody cares if I am not unboxing Chanel. I ignored her. I was too busy staring at the stack of legal documents on the chipped coffee table. I had hired a lawyer, a man named Miller, who operated out of a strip mall, to handle the class action lawsuit filed against us. "Look, Mr. Whitford," Miller had told me earlier that day, tapping a pen on his desk. "This lawsuit is serious. The plaintiffs are well funded. They have got a war chest behind them paying for top-tier representation." Who I had asked, rubbing my temples. "Who is funding a group of families from a nursing home?" "It is an anonymous trust," Miller said, flipping a page. "Something called the Harbour Lane Ethical Fund." The name stuck in my head like a splinter. Harbour Lane. Everything came back to that name. I sat on the sagging sofa and opened the case file. My eyes scanned the evidence log until they landed on a document titled Brand Ambassador Liability Waiver. At the bottom, in black ink, was a signature I knew better than my own. Vanessa Whitford. "Vanessa," I said, my voice hoarse. "You told me the paperwork for the nursing home campaign was just for image rights. You said it was administrative." "It was..." She snapped from the kitchenette, where she was trying to find a clean glass. "No," I said, holding up the paper. "This says you personally vouched for the medical amenities. It says you inspected the facilities. You signed as a guarantor of quality to these families. That is why they are suing you personally." "Well, you are the lawyer," she yelled, throwing a plastic cup into the sink. "Fix it. That is what you are for, isn't it? To fix things so I can shine." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was twisted in a snarl, her beauty distorted by a profound ugliness of spirit. "I can't fix it," I said. "We have no money, Vanessa. The retainer for Miller took the last of our savings." "Then sell something," she screamed. "Sell that stupid watch." I looked down at the Rolex Submariner on my wrist. It was a gift from Vanessa for our 3rd anniversary. Or so I thought. I unclasped it, the heavy metal cold against my skin. I remembered the day she gave it to me, how she bragged about dropping $15,000 on it. I drove to a pawn shop downtown. The broker examined it with a loupe. 8,000. He grunted. It cost 15. I argued weaky. "Market drops, buddy. Take it or leave it." I took the cash. As I walked out, a thought hit me. I checked my phone, scrolling back through years of banking notifications I had ignored. The date Vanessa bought the watch coincided perfectly with a wire transfer of exactly $15,000 into our joint account from Harbour Lane Communities. My stomach turned. My mother had paid for my own anniversary gift. Vanessa hadn't spent a dime. When I got back to the apartment, the silence was heavy. I needed to find more things to sell. I went into the bedroom and dragged out an old plastic storage bin we had moved from the villa. It was full of my mother's old things stuff she had left in the guest room that we had carelessly swept into boxes. I dug through it, looking for jewelry, anything of value. Instead, my hand closed around a bundle of letters tied with a rubber band. I pulled one out. The handwriting was shaky. Dear Mrs. Whitford, thank you for forgiving my father's bill this month. You are our guardian angel. We don't know what we would do without Harbour Lane. I opened another. To the owner, Eleanor Whitford. Thank you for the new heating system. God bless you. I froze. Owner. I tipped the box over. Dozens of documents spilled out. Not just letters, but old tax forms, incorporation papers from 20 years ago. Harbour Lane Communities LLC, sole proprietor Eleanor M. Whitford. I sat back on the dirty carpet, the air leaving my lungs. I had spent my entire life believing my mother was a mid-level manager. I thought she was a simple woman who pinched pennies because she had to. I thought I was the successful one, the golden boy who had risen above his humble origins. But the villa hers, the SUV hers, the fashion brand funded by her, my education paid by her. Jason. I looked up. Vanessa was standing at the door with 2 large suitcases. She was wearing her sunglasses, even though it was night. I am going to my parents' place in Florida, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. This squalor isn't working for me. My mental health is suffering. You are leaving, I asked. Now, when we are being sued. That is a you problem. Jason, she said, pulling the handle of her luggage. Call me when your mother decides to stop being a witch and gives us our lives back. Until then, good luck. The door slammed. I was alone. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I looked down at the letters scattered on the floor. Guardian angel. I thought about the dinner at the rooftop restaurant. I remembered Vanessa's whisper. We only invited you out of pity. I laughed. It was a dry, choking sound. I had sat there and let my wife humiliate the woman who owned the chair I sat in, the food I ate, and the clothes on my back. I had felt superior. I had felt generous for letting my mother tag along. Oh my God, I whispered, clutching a letter to my chest as the tears finally came. Mom, what have I done? I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the hero. I was the baggage. And for the first time in my life, I was heavy with the weight of my own shame. Perspective shift, Eleanor Whitford. I woke up on Wednesday to find that I had been painted as a villain. Vanessa, desperate to salvage her crumbling influencer career, had decided to strike first. She sold her story to a tawdry tabloid, and the headline screamed from the screen of my iPad. Rich daughter-in-law says toxic mother-in-law kicked her out after using her for clout. The article was a masterpiece of fiction. It featured grainy photos of me in my gardening clothes, looking disheveled and old, juxtaposed with glamorous, airbrushed shots of Vanessa. The narrative was simple. I was a jealous, penniless old woman who leeched off my son's success and then, in a fit of senile rage, used a technicality to throw them onto the street. She is controlling the narrative, Marisol said, pacing around my office at Harbour Lane headquarters. Read the comments. Eleanor, people are calling you a witch. They are saying Harbour Lane exploits young talent. The investors are nervous. Let them talk, I said, though my stomach churned. It is not just talk anymore, Marisol replied, slamming a folder onto my desk, because of her allegations that we used her for clout and then discarded her. The State Department of Health and Human Services has received anonymous tips demanding an investigation into our business practices. They are asking if we exploit our residents the way we allegedly exploited your daughter-in-law. I looked at the official seal on the letter. My silence, which had been my armor for 40 years, was now a weapon Vanessa was using to slit my throat. If I speak, I said slowly, I expose Jason. If you do not speak, Marisol countered, her voice rising, there will be no company left for Jason to inherit. You have to step into the light. Eleanor. She was right. I reached for the phone and dialed the editor-in-chief of the Financial Chronicle, a man I had known for 2 decades, but who had never known I was the owner of the industry's largest firm. Robert, I said when he answered. It is Eleanor Whitford. I have a story for you. But it is not about gossip. It is about ownership. The interview ran on Sunday. I did not play Vanessa's game. I did not mention her name or Jason's name once. Instead, I laid out the history of Harbour Lane. I showed the receipts. I spoke about scrubbing floors in 1982. I spoke about the mortgage Frank and I took out to buy the first building. I revealed, for the first time publicly, that I was the sole founder and majority shareholder of a corporation valued at over $80 million. The reaction was seismic. The internet, so quick to condemn the jealous peasant mother, whiplashed. Suddenly, I was not a leech. I was a tycoon who had chosen to live modestly. The rich DIL looked increasingly like a fool who had bitten the hand that fed her and owned the table she sat at. But Vanessa had left one final trap. Richard Cole walked into my office late Monday afternoon, his face grim. We have a problem at the Green Willow facility. The state inspectors are there now. They are focusing on the amenities Vanessa promoted in her videos. She claimed we had 24-hour physical therapy specialists. We do not. We have on-call specialists. That is a violation of truth in advertising laws. She signed the promotional waivers, I said. She vouched for the accuracy. Yes, Richard said. But we are the company. If we blame her entirely, we look like we have no oversight. If we take the blame, we pay a massive fine and admit guilt. I stood up and walked to the window. I could see the city skyline, the city I had helped build in my own quiet way. We do both, I said, turning back to him. Excuse me? Richard asked. We issue a statement accepting responsibility for a structural failure in our marketing approval process. I instructed, my voice hard. We apologize to the families. We pay the fine. We look like leaders who own our mistakes. And Vanessa then? I continued. We file a countersuit against Vanessa Whitford for civil fraud and material misrepresentation. We argue that she, as a contracted brand ambassador, willfully provided false information to the public despite having access to the correct data. We sue her for the damages to our reputation. Richard's eyes widened. Eleanor, that will destroy her defense in the class action lawsuit. If we pivot on her, she is alone. She will be buried in legal debt for the rest of her life. She wanted the spotlight, I said, sitting back down and picking up my pen. I am giving it to her. This was the point of no return. By filing this suit, I was creating a public battlefield. Jason would see the news. He would see his mother admitting a mistake to protect the company, and then turning the full force of that company against his wife. He would have to choose. He could stand with the wife who sold lies to tabloids, or he could stand with the mother who was willing to bleed cash to protect the truth. File it, I said, and send a copy to Jason's temporary address. I want him to read it before the press gets it. I had been at the cabin for 3 days when he finally came. It was a small A-frame structure tucked away in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, miles away from the manicured lawns of Lakeside Grove. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that turned the dirt road into mud. When I opened the door, Jason stood there shivering. He was not wearing the bespoke Italian suit he used to strut around in. He was wearing a polyester blend jacket that looked like it had been bought off a clearance rack, and his shoes, once polished leather, were scuffed and muddy at the heels. For the first time in years, my son looked like a man who understood the cost of things. I did not hug him. The time for coddling was over. "Tea is in the kitchen," I said, turning my back and walking into the warmth of the living room. "Pour it yourself." I sat in my armchair by the fire. The walls around me were covered in frames. There was Frank, smiling with grease on his cheek. There was Jason at age 10, holding a fishing rod. And pinned between them were laminated letters from residents, thank you notes for new heaters, for forgiven debts, for dignity restored. Jason walked in holding a mug, his hands shaking slightly. He looked around the small, rustic room as if seeing me for the first time. "I lost the apartment," he said, his voice cracking. "The retainer for the lawyer took everything. Vanessa left. She is gone. Mom." I said nothing. I just watched him. "I found the letters," he whispered, staring at the floor. "In the old box. The ones from the families. Why did you never tell me that you owned it all? Why did you let me believe you were just a manager? Because I wanted to know who you were if you did not have the money?" I answered, my voice steady. "Now I know." Jason's head snapped up. His eyes were red, filled with a sudden, desperate anger. "Is that what this was?" he shouted, stepping toward me. "A test. You destroyed my marriage, my career, my reputation. For a test, you held the strings the whole time. You let me struggle in law school while you were sitting on millions. Is that love? Mum, is that your version of love? A lesson that costs more than my entire life." I did not flinch. I reached under the side table and pulled out a thick folder. I slammed it onto the coffee table between us. "Open it," I commanded. He hesitated, then flipped it open. "That is the credit card statement for the business trip Vanessa took to Cabo San Lucas," I said, pointing at the line item. "That is the email she sent me asking for $5,000 because she accidentally overspent on shoes. And that," I pointed to a clipping from the tabloid, "is the interview where she called me a parasite." I looked him dead in the eye. "You sat there. Jason. You sat there at that table in the restaurant. You drank champagne paid for by my dividends. You wore a suit bought with my bonus. And when your wife said I was only there out of pity, you laughed. You looked away. And you let her say it." I didn't. He started to protest. "You did." I cut him off. "You bragged to your friends that you were supporting me. You told people you were the provider. But look at this electric bill from last winter. Look at the account number that paid it. It was mine. You have been playing dress-up in a life I paid for. At that dinner, you did not need more money. Jason, you needed character, and you chose wrong. Jason stared at the papers. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a crushing realization. He slumped onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders began to heave. I thought I was the hero. He sobbed, his voice muffled. I thought I was saving you. I thought I was saving you. I never even asked. I never asked you how you were doing. I never asked if you were tired. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, stripping away the arrogance that had masked him for so long. I am sorry. Mom, I am so sorry. Please, tell me how to fix this. I don't want the money. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want to be able to look at that picture of Dad and not feel like I betrayed him. I looked at the photo of Frank. He would have forgiven Jason the moment he walked in the door, but I had to be harder. I had to be the anchor. I picked up a thin, blue folder from the table and slid it toward him. Here is your chance, I said softly. He wiped his eyes, looking at it confused. What is this? There is a small nursing facility in a town called Wycliffe, I explained. It is one of the first ones we bought. A local developer named Riverside Developments is trying to force a buyout so they can bulldoze it for a resort. They are bullying the residents. They are using fine print to scare old people out of their homes. Jason opened the folder. He saw the photos of the residents' people with worn clothes and frightened eyes. I need a lawyer to go down there and stop them, I said. There is no fee. Jason. No six-figure retainer. No glory. The press will not care. It is just you, a stack of statutes, and 50 frightened old people against a corporation. I leaned forward. It is just a question of right and wrong. Can you do it? Jason ran his thumb over the edge of the paper. He took a deep breath, the smell of rain and wood smoke filling the room. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my son. When do I start? He asked. Perspective shift. Jason Whitford. Wycliffe was not a town. It was a memory of a town that had faded about 20 years ago. The main street had 3 boarded-up storefronts for everyone that was open. I parked my rental car, a compact sedan, that rattled when it hit 40 miles per hour in front of the Harbour Lane facility. It was a single-story wooden building that looked more like a large cabin than a medical centre. The paint was peeling, and the wheelchair ramp needed sanding. But the windows were clean, and there were flower boxes filled with bright marigolds. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and rubbing alcohol. I met the residents in the common room. There were about 50 of them. Some were sharp as tacks. Others were drifting in the fog of dementia. They looked at me with a mixture of hope and terror. Are they going to sell us? Son, a woman named Mrs. Higgins asked, gripping her walker with trembling hands. My daughter lives in Oregon. I cannot move that far. This is all I have. I am reading the contract now. Ma'am, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The offer from Riverside Developments, Inc. was a masterclass in deception. On the surface, it promised a state-of-the-art wellness resort. In the fine print, which I read under the flickering light of the nurse's station at 2 a.m, it revealed the truth. The current residents would be guaranteed placement for only 6 months. After that, the rates would triple to market value, effectively evicting every single person in the room. The next day, a representative from Riverside asked to meet me for lunch at the only diner in town. His name was Sterling, and he wore a suit that cost more than the car I was driving. He reminded me of myself 3 weeks ago. "Look, Jason," Sterling said, sliding a contract across the greasy table. "We know your mother is sentimental, but this is business. If you can convince her that the sale is the only viable financial option, Riverside would be very interested in retaining you as lead counsel for the development. The retainer is $10,000 a month, plus a $50,000 signing bonus." I looked at the check. It was enough to get me an apartment. It was enough to buy a new watch. It was enough to start over. I will think about it," I said. That night, I slept on a cot in the facility's small office because I could not afford the motel down the road. I listened to the sounds of the building, the hum of oxygen tanks, the soft shuffle of the night nurse checking rooms, the coughing of an old man down the hall. For the first time in my life, I was not thinking about billing hours. I was thinking about the fact that if I signed that paper, the man coughing down the hall would be dead on the street in 6 months. The next morning, I sat on the porch with Marvin, a resident who sat in a wheelchair with a blanket over his knees. I learned he used to be a circuit court judge. "You know the cases I hated the most?" Marvin asked me, his voice gravelly but clear. Guardianship disputes. Kids trying to declare their parents incompetent so they could sell the house. They always said it was for the parents' own good. But it was always about the inheritance. I looked into their eyes, and I saw nothing but math. No love. Just subtraction. He looked at me. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but they seemed to see right through my skin. "You have that look, son. The look of a man who almost did the math wrong." I felt a chill go down my spine. I went back to the office and tore up Sterling's business card. I spent the next 48 hours drafting a legal response. I did not just reject the sale. I outlined a counter-proposal for Harbour Lane. Instead of selling, we would take out a low-interest loan to renovate the facility ourselves. The projected return on investment would drop to 4%, a number that would make any Wall Street investor vomit. But it would keep the doors open. Riverside fought back dirty. On Friday, the local Wycliffe Gazette ran a front-page story, "Big city lawyer, son of owner comes to town, is he here to cash out?" They tried to paint me as a carpetbagger, a spoiled rich kid coming to liquidate the town's assets. I wanted to run. I wanted to get in my car and drive back to Charlotte and hide. But then I remembered Mrs. Higgins' trembling hands. I called a town hall meeting in the church basement. The room was packed. People were angry. They held up copies of the newspaper. "I am not here to cash out," I said, standing before them without a podium, my voice shaking just a little. "Yes, I am the owner's son. Yes, I have made mistakes. I lived a life where I thought money was the only way to keep score. But I read the Riverside contract. They are going to raise your rents by 300% in 6 months. A gasp went through the room. My mother sent me here to do a job. I continued, looking at the faces in the crowd. Not to make a profit, but to protect a home. I am proposing a plan that makes almost no money for the company, but guarantees that no one in this room has to move. Not today. Not ever. I pulled out a petition I had drafted, a legal commitment to the residents. I signed it first. My name is on the line. I said, if I am lying, you can disbar me. One by one. They came up. Mrs. Higgins, Marvin, the nurses. Even the skepticism in the room melted into relief. That night, I put the signed documents into a thick envelope addressed to Eleanor Whitford at Harbour Lane headquarters. I typed a short email to accompany the tracking number. Mom, I do not know what you will decide about me, but regarding Wycliffe, this is the right thing to do. The renovation plan means the profit margin is razor thin. You might lose money in the short term, but you won't lose the people. I signed my name on both lines as the attorney of record and as your son. I hit send. I had no money in my pocket, no home to go back to, and my wife was gone. But as I lay on the cot that night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. Perspective shift. Eleanor Whitford. The boardroom at Harbour Lane headquarters was colder than usual, or perhaps it was just the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Marisol stood at the head of the table, projecting 2 columns of numbers onto the screen. Option A, she said, her laser pointer hitting the left column. We sell the Wycliffe facility to Riverside Developments. The cash injection is substantial. It clears our current liabilities and pleases the investors. She moved the pointer to the right. Option B, we reject the sale. We take on a low-interest loan to renovate the facility ourselves. The return on investment drops to 4%. It is barely profitable, but it keeps the residents in their homes. Every eye in the room turned to me. I did not speak. Instead, I nodded toward the end of the table. I would like to yield the floor to the legal representative for the Wycliffe residents, I said. Jason stood up. He was not wearing a designer suit. He wore a simple button-down shirt and the face of a man who had spent the last month sleeping on a cot. He did not have a PowerPoint presentation. He just had a stack of handwritten letters in his trembling hands. I don't have a spreadsheet, Jason said, his voice quiet but steady. I just have this letter from Mrs. Higgins. She is 82. She writes. He paused, looking down at the paper. She writes, I am afraid. I am afraid of being sold like a piece of used furniture. Please do not let me die in a strange place. A board member, a man named Henderson, who cared only about quarterly targets, leaned forward. We appreciate the sentiment. Jason. But do you understand the risk? We are a business. We cannot run on charity. Jason looked up, and for the first time, I saw the steel in his spine that I had prayed for. We are not running on charity, Jason countered. We are running on efficiency. Last year, this company spent $300,000 on brand ambassadors and influencer parties. That money evaporated. I propose we cut the vanity budget to 0. No more galas. No more fashion collaborations. We take that capital and put it into Wycliffe. We invest in insulation, not Instagram. The room went silent. I looked at my son, and then I looked at the board. I vote for option B, I announced, my voice cutting through the tension, and effective immediately. We are instituting a new corporate charter. Harbour Lane will never sell a facility with long-term residents unless we have the written consent of 80% of those living there. We sell homes, not assets. The shock in the room was palpable, but the gavel came down. The motion passed. Now, I said, turning to Richard. Update us on the Vanessa Whitford litigation. Richard cleared his throat. The court has accepted our settlement proposal. Vanessa has admitted to material misrepresentation. Instead of a fine, which she cannot pay, she has agreed to 18 months of mandatory community service. He paused, a small smile touching his lips. Specifically, she will be working 30 hours a week at our Green Willow facility. She will be assisting the custodial staff and helping transport residents to physical therapy. No cameras allowed. I nodded. It was the perfect sentence. Money is not the issue. I said to the room. The issue is that she never understood what we do here. She treated our residents like props. Now, she will learn what it actually means to take care of them. When the meeting adjourned, I waited for Jason in the hallway. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were clear. "You did good in there," I said. It was not a gushing compliment, just the truth. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small ID badge. I handed it to him. It read, Jason Whitford, Director of Resident Advocacy. "The pay is the same as every other director," I told him sternly. "Not a cent more. No stock options. No company car. You have to earn every single dollar you take home. Can you handle that?" Jason took the badge, running his thumb over his name. Yes, I can. 6 months later, the autumn leaves were turning gold around my cabin in the mountains. It was no longer a lonely retreat. Inside, the fire was crackling, and the smell of roast chicken filled the air. It was a small gathering. Marisol was there, laughing with Richard. Lila, a nurse from Wycliffe, was helping set the table. And Jason was sitting next to Marvin, the retired judge, listening intently to a story about a case from 1990. Vanessa was not there. She was likely scrubbing a floor in Greenwillow, finally doing an honest day's work. As we sat down to eat, Jason stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork. "I want to say something," he said, looking around the table. His gaze landed on me. A year ago, I sat at a table much fancier than this one. Jason began, his voice thick with emotion. "I watched my wife lean over and tell my mother, 'We only invited you out of pity.' And I let it happen. I smiled because I thought I was better than her." He took a deep breath. "Tonight, I look around this table and I realize the truth. If there is anyone here who was invited out of pity, it is me. I am the one who needed saving. And Mom, I am so grateful you loved me enough to let me fall so I could learn how to stand up." The room was quiet, warm, and real. I felt a smile spread across my face, not the cold, sharp smile I had worn at the restaurant, but a genuine one that reached my eyes. I raised my glass. A long time ago, I was told not to stay too long, I said, looking at the faces of the people who had stood by me when it mattered. But tonight, the only people I want to stay for as long as possible are the ones sitting right here. Outside. The wind howled through the trees, but inside the cabin, the light was steady and bright. The empire of lies had collapsed, leaving behind something much stronger, a family built on truth. Thank you so much for tuning in to this story. I really hope you enjoyed the journey of Eleanor and her family. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the kitchen, your car, or maybe relaxing in the backyard? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. Please don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, smash that like button, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people. See you in the next video.